Welcome back. I'm Michael Bull, and this is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Well, today we're exploring crowdfunding, and I want you to please welcome my next guest, Jiliene Helman, CEO of Realty Mogul. Jiliene, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, we appreciate you coming to Studio One today. And Jiliene, the Jobs Act and I guess people being more open to technology today has really opened some opportunities for sponsors of real estate projects to match up with investors. What is the latest on the Job Act?
Yeah, so the Jobs Act is a piece of legislation that introduced crowdfunding to the world, and we're still waiting on final regulations to come out of the Jobs Act. Originally, it was meant so any investor across the country could invest, whether they're an accredited investor or a non-accredited investor. Today, the crowdfunding is only open to accredited investors, and the Securities and Exchange Commission has just done their proposed regulations for Title III of the Jobs Act, which will open it up to non-accredited investors. So it's still going to be some time until we see it being fully legal. Okay, but the Jobs Act already has allowed companies like you to put this out on the internet to attract investors, but they still have to be accredited. Is that correct? Absolutely. So we're doing crowdfunding for real estate today, but we're limited to an accredited investor. So tell us about some of the challenges of where it is right now before this the regulations are finished here. So with accredited investors, we're able to invest in any dollar amount of real estate. You know, as we all know, real estate can get into really big numbers, 10, 20, 30, hundreds of millions of dollars. In the proposed regulations through the Jobs Act, there's going to be $1 million cap on how much you can raise through crowdfunding. So that's a little bit challenging for real estate specifically. There's also another challenge around a requirement for audited financials if you raise over $500,000. Now, audited financials could cost anywhere from $20,000 or $30,000, and those sponsors are going to pass that off to the investor. That's going to be a charge that the investor is going to have to pay for, and that's a concern of mine in the proposed regulations. Yeah, it's interesting. So when I was first asked about how I thought crowdfunding would affect commercial real estate, and I said I don't think it'd have a big effect because of that $1 million limit. But it's interesting, the fact that you can advertise for accredited investors has taken the world by storm, hasn't it? Yeah, it's absolutely taken the world by storm. You know, when I tell folks that there's already been hundreds of millions of dollars in property value that has been crowdfunded, they're astonished. It's a new industry, but you know, real estate I think is going to be a very, very large part of the crowdfunding industry. And there's a lot of accredited investors in the United States. You know, you're looking at 8 to 9 million people who today can invest in real estate through these online websites and through crowdfunding. So it's a lot easier to find. So if there is a limit of $1 million, do you think that will pass that way? Will that be the end result? And if it is, will you really want to fool with non-accredited investors under $1 million? Or do you think it really have any effect in commercial real estate? Yeah, that's a big challenge. You know, $1 million, as we mentioned, in real estate just isn't meaningful. But what I think there is going to be, and this is a hunch, but the hunch is that there's going to be a carve-out for real estate specifically. You know, if you are the regulator, if you're the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you're asking yourself, what is the risk profile of a commercial real estate transaction compared to crowdfunding for a startup or crowdfunding for a small business? Real estate just doesn't get up and walk away. You know, startups fail and small businesses close all the time. But real estate is a tangible physical thing. And so I think that we're going to see a carve out from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I think that it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be part of the proposed regulations that come out in the first round of crowdfunding for non-accredited investors. But I do think there will be something specific for real estate. And I think that it took the regulators by surprise. I don't think they realized how big of a piece real estate was going to be when they first did the regulations for crowdfunding. Right, and it's really good timing for real estate, right? We've just been through a recession. The fundamentals are improving, so it's really good timing when you look at people's openness to technology and to working on the internet more than they ever have. And then you're looking at a market where people are okay. It feels okay to invest in real estate, right? Absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny, you know, investors have to be comfortable when they're making an investment decision, whether it's an investment in real estate or small business or stocks and bonds. And the beauty of it is that we have a lot of investors now who have invested in online broker-dealers. Think E-Trade, think Scottrade. These are companies that they've gotten comfortable with to trade stocks and bonds. I think it was only a matter of time before they traded real estate on the internet. Right. Well, tell us how your Realty Mogul system, how that worked for a sponsor. Sure. So Realty Mogul is an online marketplace for real estate investing, and we match real estate sponsors with accredited investors. So for a real estate sponsor, they typically get a property under contract. Could be an apartment building, could be an office building, could be a retail shopping center. And then they come to Realty Mogul to raise a portion of their equity capital. Usually the debt capital is facilitated via bank because it's cheaper. You know, bank debt is cheap right now at 3.5% or 4.5%. And they come to Realty Mogul to raise money for the equity portion from the crowd. We try and streamline that process as much as humanly possible. So we pool all of our investors into a single entity, typically a limited liability company, and we're making one investment with that sponsor. So for that sponsor, it means they've got one K1, one set of reports, one distribution, and we've built software in order to scale that. We've built software where it doesn't matter if there's one investor in the transaction or 95 investors in the transaction. It's just as easy and just as streamlined.
Okay, but it's still up to the investor to pretty much totally vet the deal, right, and the sponsor.
So we put all of the sponsors and all of the deals through our proprietary underwriting, and we curate transactions, meaning we might look at $1 billion in real estate and we might only put up, $50 million to invest in the platform, but it is the responsibility of the underlying investor to make that investment decision. Investing is a very personal thing. So what that means is that different investors have different needs. Some have needs for immediate cash flow. Some have needs for holding on to an investment for 2 years as opposed to 10 years. And we can't make that decision for the investor. So the underlying investment is up to the actual investor themselves. And
that brings up the question of exit strategy. So I guess these investors that are going in that LLC, that pool, they've got to have the same exit strategy plans, right?
Exactly. And every single transaction has a business plan. So the exit strategy for one transaction may be a 2 to 3 year hold. Maybe it's a major value add project. Where an exit strategy for another project may be a 10-year hold, and they're relying or looking for a market to really improve before they have an exit. So the investors knows that going into the transaction, and they should be prepared to hold for the long term on these investments.
And who pays the cost at Realty Mogul? The investors or the sponsor or both?
So both the investor and the sponsor pay us. For the investor, we're typically charging between 1% and 2% a year. And that's to manage and do all the administration around these funds for the investor. So we do all the underlying reporting, all the underlying distributions, and also all the tax documentation at year end.
Okay, and what types of properties work well in your platform?
There's a huge appetite for cash flow right now. Investors are yield starved. They're making less than 1% in the banks, and they love getting a monthly or a quarterly check. So what we're seeing that works best at Realty Mogul is apartment buildings, shopping centers, office buildings. We just closed on a self-storage transaction. There was a ton of appetite for self-storage. But the overarching theme across all these investments is cash flow. They're generating monthly or quarterly distributions directly into the pockets of our investors.
So it's the same thing that's working well on the open market. It's leased stable income properties.
There you go. Stable cash flowing properties.
And who's your typical, we're short of the break, but who's your typical investor?
So what's really interesting about Realty Mogul is we have very sophisticated investors. We've got folks from the major brokerage firms in real estate. We've got high finance individuals who are working at major investment banks and major commercial banks. And we've also got a really interesting contingent of technology folks. These are senior software engineers at Google and Facebook and Yahoo, in addition to doctors and dentists and other professionals who want exposure to commercial real estate.
But they're all accredited.
They are.
So you take them through that process.
We do.
All right, well, stay with us. We'll have a quick break here. More on crowdfunding. I'm Michael Bull. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. We'll be right back. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you in part by your friends at Bull Realty. When your business requires proven performance, visit bullrealty.com or call 800-408-BULL. Welcome back. I'm Michael Bull, and this is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Hey, we do appreciate hearing from you. If you have any comments or questions, reach out to us on social media, email, phone, or smoke signals, right? You can try anything. You can access all our contacts at commercialrealestateshow.com. realtyMogul.com. And if you're having a drinking game based on the number of times we mentioned the website, you might be getting a little tipsy by now. I'm sorry about that. My guest today is Jiliene Helman with Realty Mogul, and we're talking about crowdfunding. And Jiliene, another question that some investors may have out there is there a minimum or a maximum investment that an investor can make in these projects?
So our minimum investment is either $5,000 or $10,000, and we have no maximum. You know, investors have done hundreds of thousands of dollars with us. We've had other investors who have done millions of dollars with us. We try and make it flexible to allow those investors to get the exposure that they want.
Okay. And one of the advantages to commercial real estate, and I guess real estate in general, is some tax advantages. So the investors investing in and pooling their money in these investments through crowdfunding at Realty Mogul, are they getting some of the tax advantages?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as you mentioned, one of the big benefits of real estate has been the tax advantages, and we structure our investments as limited liability companies, or LLCs, and those allow for us to pass through depreciation direct to the investor on their tax documents at the end of the year.
Okay. And what types of sponsors are you generally working with there?
So we're usually looking for best-in-class real estate sponsors. And the way that we define that is they are focused on a specific geography and focused on a specific property type. So Atlanta multifamily, for example, or Dallas, Texas retail. We find that those types of sponsors tend to have the best expertise in those markets. And historically, our sponsors have done over $100 million in transactions before they turn to crowdfunding to grow their businesses.
Okay. And one of the challenges that the investors find today is deal flow, finding properties to invest in. How is Realty Mogul affecting that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. A lot of people, when they talk about crowdfunding, talk about democratization of access to capital. We think about it completely differently. We think about crowdfunding as democratization to access to deal flow. It's incredibly challenging to find good real estate transactions in today's market. We're seeing, investors come to us with transactions that are 4 or 5 caps in the multifamily world when we're not investing in anything less than a 6.5, a 7, or an 8 cap, depending on the market. And one of the reasons that we're able to get such access to deal flow is because we have so many sponsors that are working with Realty Mogul that are scouring the country looking for transactions. So think about hiring all these sponsors to go find the best transactions, and that's really what we've done. Our access to and our size to deal flow continues to amaze me on a daily basis.
That's interesting. Well, one of the challenges that investors have had, especially small investors, is on the exit strategy, especially with the TICs in the past and sometimes with just normal limited partnerships. So what do you say to exit strategy questions from investors?
Yeah, every transaction has a business plan, and we're laying out the exit. But, I think, Michael, eventually we're going to see a secondary market. Investors should not rely on it, but whether Realty Mogul builds it or another company builds it, if crowdfunding gets as massive as I think it's going to get, in the tens of billions or the hundreds of billions of dollars, there's going to be a market for a secondary market. And it'll just be a matter of time. But again, investors can't invest thinking that. They have to invest for the long term. They have to invest knowing that their capital is going to be tied up for the life of the business plan.
Right. It is a commercial real estate investment, right?
It is. It's physical, it's tangible, and it's not easy to sell.
Okay. And what are some tips that you would give investors who are looking at crowdfunding investing in real estate?
So the most important thing is to get educated. A lot of our investors are very sophisticated in real estate. For others, they haven't had access to real estate before. So education is very big, and we run an education center for that. The other thing is to be careful about the crowdfunding company that you're investing in. And it's funny that as the CEO of a crowdfunding company, I would say this, but not every crowdfunding for real estate company is going to be around. We're running startups. We're operating startups. You want to be with a company that is well capitalized. We wouldn't even open our doors until we'd raised capital, institutional capital for the company, because I didn't want to be a business that went out of business. And I think that's really important for investors. They need to be investing with solid companies. They need to be investing with a management team that they can trust. And they need to be willing to ask questions. We're very open to taking questions. We're very open to sharing with investors what's our business model, what's our plan, how are we capitalized, how do we intend to stay capitalized. It's a big part of our business.
Okay. And tell me about the Education Center.
So the Education Center for us runs the gamut for sophisticated investors and, new investors. And it's everything from what is a cap rate? What are the various mortgage laws? How do you underwrite a retail transaction? How do you underwrite a self-storage transaction? What are the key things to look at when you're investing with a new sponsor? We try and take, tips and tricks that we've learned in the business and share them directly with our investors.
Or maybe you can add, telling them to listen to the Commercial Real Estate Show, right?
Listen to the Commercial Real Estate Show. There you go.
Well, Jiliene, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
If you'd like more information, visit realtymogul.com. Just a moment, we'll have more on crowdfunding. I'm Michael Bull. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. We'll be right back. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Atlanta Office Liquidators, new and used furniture liquidators, France Media, publications and conferences, and Bull Realty Commercial Brokerage, a great place to do business. For more information on these companies or to access additional podcasts, videos, or blogs, visit commercialrealestateshow.com.